My sister and I had a big fight last week. I was so sure I was right that I refused to apologize. This morning, I got a call. She'd been in an accident. My heart sank. I rushed to the hospital, rehearsing my apology, afraid it might be too late. When I walked into her room, I broke down. I'm sorry, I whispered. The woman in the bed smiled weakly and said, me too. Then the nurse walked in. Oh, you're her sister? She asked. Sister? I said, confused. She checked her clipboard. You're in the wrong room. I laughed nervously and rushed to the right room, where my sister sat up, scratches on her face but smiling. Took you long enough, she teased. I hugged her. I'm sorry, I said. Me too, she replied. Don't let pride keep you from making things right. Life is fragile. Act before it's too late. Subscribe if this means something to you. Like for more videos like this. A poor farmer, Adisa, works tirelessly under the sun. One fateful day, his hoe strikes something unusual. The Calabash speaks. Adisa, I hold the wisdom to change your life. Start by planting cassava near the stream. Weeks later, Adisa's farm flourished. The villagers marveled at his luck. Adisa, remember, humility is key, warned the Calabash. But wealth began to cloud his mind. He wanted more. Adisa demanded more secrets from the Calabash. Plant on the rocky hills, it advised reluctantly. Months passed, and the crops grew abundantly. Adisa's fame spread far and wide, but the Calabash grew silent. Desperate, Adisa shook it violently. You have strayed from wisdom, it finally said. Greed will lead to your ruin, Adisa. Adisa ignored the warning. He expanded his farms recklessly. Then came the drought. Adisa lost everything. Broken, he returned to the Calabash. Adisa, wealth means nothing without humility. Adisa vowed to change. He shared his wisdom with the villagers. The village thrived together. Adisa found true contentment. The Calabash rested, its purpose fulfilled. True wealth is in humility and sharing with others. One day, Femi's uncle found a crumpled flyer in his room. It was about the upcoming career day at school, where students were to bring a family member to talk about their jobs. Embarrassed that his uncle was a Danfo driver, Femi had hidden the flyer. On career day, students brought relatives who spoke about their careers as doctors, engineers, and business executives. Just as Femi thought the day would end without embarrassment, he heard a familiar horn outside. His uncle strolled into the classroom wearing his bright yellow conductor vest and a cheerful grin. Femi froze in his seat. Surely everyone would mock him now. As his uncle greeted the class, Femi wished he could disappear. But then, his uncle began to speak. He shared how his job was not just about driving people around, but about being a lifeline to the city, getting children to school, workers to their offices, and traders to the market. He talked about the importance of patience, resilience, and the value of treating passengers with respect, no matter their background. To Femi's surprise, his classmates were intrigued. They asked questions about how Danfoss navigated Lagos traffic and how he managed to stay cheerful despite the chaos. For the first time, Femi saw his uncle in a different light, not as someone to be ashamed of, but as someone who played a crucial role in people's lives. As the day ended, Femi walked up to his uncle and said, Uncle Segun, I'm sorry for hiding the flyer. His uncle smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. Femi me, he said, never be ashamed of your family. It's not the job that defines you, it's the honesty and pride you put into it. And at that moment, Femi knew his uncle was a true hero. In the small village of Ayatoro, the rains had stopped for months, and the river that everyone depended on had dried up. Buckets stood empty, and spirits grew weary. Each family rationed what little water they had left, but it was never enough. Damilola, a 19-year-old girl with bright eyes and a strong will, couldn't bear to see her neighbors suffer. Every morning, she tied her scarf tightly, picked up 2 large buckets, and began the long walk to a distant stream miles away. The journey was harsh, with the sun blazing overhead and the dusty path stretching endlessly. But Damilola didn't complain. She thought of her younger siblings, the elderly in the village, and the thirsty crops that desperately needed water. At first, people didn't notice her efforts. But one day, as Damilola returned with her buckets filled to the brim, a neighbor asked, Damilola, why do you do this every day? Isn't it too much for you? Damilola smiled and said, If I don't, who will? Her words spread through the village, and soon others began to join her. Young men carried larger containers, women brought food to share along the way, and even the elders contributed by organizing schedules. What started as Damilola's solitary journey became a collective effort. Together, the villagers ensured that everyone had enough water. Months later, when the rains finally returned and the river flowed again, the village celebrated. But they didn't just celebrate the rain, they celebrated Damilola. Her selflessness had taught them that even in the toughest times, one person's determination could inspire an entire community. As Damilola stood by the now full river, she looked at her neighbors and smiled. She had carried water, but together they had carried hope.